Energy is energy. Energy lives in everything. Everything that has, is a living organism. Everything is interconnected. And these are just resources that allow us to be even that much more connected to one another.
Hello and welcome to Self Talk. I'm Rachel Astarte. Today, my guest is Roxanne Chaput. She is the founder and chief executive officer of Roxanne Chaput Limited. She is a life and love coach, an inspirational speaker, spiritual guide, and energy healer who guides individuals in transition to create lasting, sustainable change in their lives. Roxanne, thank you so much for being on Self Talk today.
Oh, thank you so much, Rachel, for having me today. It's an honor.
So we have a lot to talk about, but I'd love to get started with what was your individual calling to this work?
Absolutely. So there has been kind of an abundance of events that really have kind of integrated me to be where I am today. But I always had this profound knowingness when I was a little girl that I was being called to serve. And I just didn't really understand what that looked like. I always had this burning sensation of a fire inside me, just kind of calling me, but I can never put words to it. I can never put a context to it. And I would ask family and friends, like, do you have this burning feeling that 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 you need to be doing something more, that you're going to do something great? And they're always like, oh, well, no, like, I know that I want to be like a lawyer or a doctor or whatnot. I was like, well, that's amazing, but it wasn't the same feeling. So I went, the entirety of really my childhood and my adolescent life, really not having anybody to kind of resonate or to affirm that feeling that they also had experienced that feeling. And throughout my journey, funny enough, my entire journey, really, I was guiding people. I like at every career that I had chosen, every friendship, every relationship that I had. And even as a small child, 5, 6 years old, people would come to me, adults would come to me for wisdom. They'd come to be in my energy, to kind of, be like reset their energy, just to kind of feel the calmness that I would provide them. And I never really realized that like those were my gifts. And I remember my mom and like all these people like saying like, oh, like you're such an old soul and like you're a wise soul. And I was like, I never really understood what that terminology meant. I was just like, oh, okay. Like, I guess I know things I don't know. And, people would come to me like, which life path should I take? Like, I'm going through this transition in my life. Like, what should be my next step? What do you think? And I was just a child at this moment. So I was always very receptive to energy and I was always guiding people. I just never understood that those were actually my gifts and abilities. And as I kind of transgressed through life, I had these careers. I worked at a cancer center where I was guiding patients that were in a palliative state through their end stages of life. And it wasn't just, adults or the elderly. I also had a pediatric population.
Wow.
I was always guiding people no matter where they were on their journey. And then I went into another position and then I was still guiding. I was guiding more at the commencement stages of life. I was working at a local college and I was helping them kind of start, their expedition of this incredible thing that we call life. So I've always was kind of, coaching and guiding and kind of just being that place of solace and solitude for those that were around me. And I went through quite a bit of trials and tribulations throughout my life. I've experienced so many unhealthy relationships to a very, very unhealthy marriage where I ended up leaving with my 3 beautiful children. And shortly after I had left my marriage, literally, I experienced 4 near-death experiences simultaneously within the span of that 2-year time frame. And every time that I had these near-death experiences, it was like it was bringing me closer to my calling. And the first time that it had happened, we always say that we're happy. We always say that we're content with our life and that, we're optimistic or we're positive, and we're always lying to ourselves in a sense. Like we don't really understand that we're lying to ourselves. We're just getting through our day. And we never really want to tell someone like, oh, I don't feel in alignment. I don't feel this is what I'm being called to do. And after the first near-death experience, it was like this pivotal moment. It was like this catalyst moment. I was like, okay, I tell everybody I'm happy and that I'm content with my life, but am I truly happy and content with my life? I don't feel in alignment. I don't feel like this is my purpose. I don't feel like being an executive at a local college is my calling. Like, I don't feel like I'm serving the way that I'm being asked to serve. So that's when I really started, embarking on my own self and soul mastery journey. And that kind of led me into energy healing, because as I was on this journey and I was being receptive and I was allowing myself to feel what I needed to feel, I ended up having this incredible dream for almost 4 months straight. And I am of an indigenous culture. So here in Canada, we call it a Métis culture. So I am Native American and French, and we call it Métis here. And I had this beautiful indigenous woman who was coming to me in my dream for almost 4 months. And she was standing in front of this ravine, and there was teepees beside her. And she was in front of this ravine, and had her arms extended to me, and she was hymning this song to me. She was chanting this song to me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, in the connection to her felt like it was like of my maternal great grandmother. Like it felt like a very good and like very warm and very close connection. And I would wake up in the morning and I would start chanting the song and singing the song. And my partner was like, wow, that's a beautiful song. Like, where did you get that from? I'm like, this is what she sings to me in my dream every single night. And he's like, wow, like he didn't know how to do like a dream interpretation of that. And I do dream interpretation. I was like, what is she telling me? Like, is she calling me to the land? What is she asking me to do? So I ended up bringing this dream to an elder in my community, and our elders are the ones that kind of carry the wisdom. They carry all the plant medicines. They're the shamans of our communities. And I was telling him of my dream, and he was like, she's calling you to the land. I'm like, okay, she's calling me to the land. Yeah, okay, I see that. He's like, but she's calling you to the land to come and heal. I'm like, come and heal. I'm like, where am I going? Like, what am I doing? Like, where do I start? And he's like, it will come to you in vision. And I started singing him and chanting him the song that she was singing to me. And he said, oh my goodness. He said, he's like, my great grandfather used to sing that song to us. And that hasn't been heard in healing circles for over 100 years. It was just a melody that my great grandfather would chant to me before like bedtime or whatnot. And I like right then and there, I just had goosebumps all through my body. He's like, but it's not the same rendition. It's almost like she customized it for you. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like, what am I supposed to do with this? He's like, you're meant to be a healer. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, what am I doing with this? So I kind of sat with this for a little while after. And I met this incredible spiritual guide shortly after. And there was no connection to this elder and this spiritual guide. And I told her of my dream, and she said, she's calling you to the land, and she's calling you to come and heal. And she's like, you're meant to be a healer. You're meant to be a shaman. I was like, well, where do I go? What do I do? Like, how do I start this journey? She's like, it will come to you in vision. They both said the same thing. So I was like, oh my goodness, like, what do I do with all this information? It's exciting, but it's like nerve-wracking, and I don't know what direction I'm supposed to be going into. And funny enough, the last night that I had the dream, I just had it was just like this strong sensation, and it like overcame me. And it was like, I needed to go to this place to heal. And I knew exactly where I needed to go in my mind. And I had told my partner, I said, listen, I said, I'm being called to the land to come and heal. I said, I can't explain it. I can't tell you where I'm going or why I'm doing it, but I just know that I need to do this. And it was pouring rain outside. He's like, okay. He's like, you're going in the pouring rain in the forest with wolves and bears with no like protection. And like, you're 2.5 hours away. It's not like I can just drive there, you know? I was like, you know what? I'm going to be fine. Like, I feel protected. And I said, I'll bring something for your sanity, but I know I'm fine. And I get like in this like journey there, I'm like crying my eyes out. All of a sudden, like I had put this music on that I always listen to. And it was this indigenous song that I always kind of listened to as a child. And I was chanting this song that she was singing to me. And it was just like releasing tears out of like every part of my being. And it was like I was suppressed so badly emotionally that I really hadn't really cried like that. I can't even remember the last time I've ever cried like that. I was always trying to be strong for my children, strong for those around me. but I never really allowed myself to process my own emotions. And it was like this release. It was like the floodgates open and everything just came pouring out. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, so I literally cried for 2.5 hours as I was driving to this location. And I get to this spot, and these grounds are known, they're known like healing grounds. They're traditional indigenous healing grounds. And I'm walking on the land, and it was like a 15-minute to 20-minute trek in. And I see this incredible rock. And I was like, I need to heal there. So I go and I sit on this rock, and I'm doing a smudging ceremony. So for listeners that may not know what smudging is, it's like a cleansing and a clearing of our energy. And what we do is we burn like herbs, like sage, cedar, pine, anything of that nature to order to clear our energy and to rid anything that doesn't belong in the entity of our being. And I'm doing this smudging ceremony on this rock, and I'm just like releasing and releasing. And all of a sudden, a deer, a bunny, a chipmunk is like surrounding me. And there's a hummingbird swimming, like literally just flying from tree to tree. And I was like, wow, that's really bizarre, because I was just in awe. I was like, oh my goodness, like I couldn't even believe what was happening. And this little chipmunk's beside me, and I have no food for him. And I was like, oh, sorry, buddy. And he was just like kind of like hanging out. You know how chipmunks are, they're very friendly. And then all of a sudden, like I'm seeing this hummingbird, and I'm like, wait, this doesn't make sense. Like hummingbirds don't usually fly when it's pouring rain like that. Like it's drizzling, but not when it's pouring rain. And I was just like in awe. And it was like this reconnection to my ancestry, a reconnection to all the elements. And, you know, like I had fire there. I was doing a smudging ceremony, I had water surrounding me. I had the trees, I had the earth, I had the wind. It was absolutely incredible. And like at that moment, I was like, oh my goodness, like I was never the same after that moment. And as I'm sitting on this rock, I'm like, okay, wait, I'm looking up above me, and there's no enclosure over this rock. Like I'm surrounded by trees, but there's no enclosure directly over the rock. And I realized for almost 4 hours that I was sitting there crying, that not one single drop of rain hit me the entire time that I was sitting on this rock.
Wow.
I was dry. I was bone dry. And the rock was moist. Like, so before I had sat on it, like there was moisture to the rock. So I was like, oh my goodness, what is going on? Like, I was just like this incredible moment. And after that moment, it was just like my life was never the same. My thinking was never the same. And I knew what my purpose was. And it was like I had this reconnection to my ancestry and to my lineage that was so powerful and so innate that it was undeniable. And then at that moment, I knew, I was like, you know what? I'm meant to be a healer. But before I bring this to anyone, I need to make sure that what I can do, like what I did for myself, I can replicate for others.
Mm.
Sure enough, I used family and friends as like guinea pigs. I was like, you want to come on this healing journey with me? And they were like, yeah, sure. I was like, okay. And everyone that came on this healing journey with me were never the same afterward. Their life changed dramatically too, for the better.
Mm.
So it's like,
Wow.
I am a healer.
That is incredible. Yeah. I mean, when we think about so I practice shamanism myself. And so when, I was thinking about that dream you had, it's what we call a big dream,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, we have dreams, but when you get that kind of guidance, and the dream world, for people who don't know shamanism very well, the dream world is just as real
Yep.
as our ordinary reality.
Absolutely. It's a parallel universe for us, right? It's a parallel world for us.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, shortly after that, I was initiated into my tribal community as, in fact, a shaman. So it was just a really beautiful thing, a really beautiful ceremony. And it was just like that affirmation, like, I am finally home. I am finally in alignment with who I am. I found myself, and it was just such a beautiful, beautiful moment. And it was funny because as I was telling the shaman, the elder of my community, about my dream, he was like, you're never supposed to speak of what spirit says to you in the dream. He's like, you're supposed to figure that out on your own. But I was like, well, come on. Like, I don't even know what this means. Like, I don't even know where to go from this. And he's like, okay, come on.
Yeah, because it's actually worse not to take the advice or the gifts that you receive. If it's like, oh, it was just a dream, then it's like, how do I get through to this woman? So you need some help sometimes.
Yeah. And I was like, he's like, oh, she's persistent. Like 4 months. I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Persistent.
Beautiful. So then you called on your family and friends to try this out. And that was very powerful. What was the transition into making this a livelihood for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And before that, like before this dream had even, presented itself to me, I was already into the coaching realm. I was already mentoring others. I was already in kind of like that aspect of my business. So it was just something, it was just a natural progression. And then when I started releasing like content about energy healing and shamanism and what it truly is and our bodies and how we, like how our emotional distress and physical distress and intellectual distress all comes from our energetic disruption. So when I started educating people, it was like, wow, like everyone was like, yes, this is you. Like all my family and friends, like anyone that didn't know that I was kind of stepping into this world was like, oh, like we don't know why you weren't doing this sooner.
Mm-hmm.
It was just that moment. And then clients just started coming one after. It was just everything was organic. Everything
Yeah.
just happened so beautifully. And when I was working with my clients, they were fearful. They didn't understand what shamanism was, right? And it was just about having that education component so that they understood what it was. Shamans were, medicinal doctors, spirit doctors, energy doctors in the tribal communities. And I mean, shamanism has been around for over 300,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, as you know, it's the most traditional healing
Yeah.
methodology and modality that there is on this earth. So
Yeah.
this is what we need to come back to. And in collaboration with modern technology and modern advancements, it's absolutely even that much more incredible.
Yeah. And there is no difference. A lot of people think shamanism is about, well, it is about nature and returning to the earth and returning to, well, the cosmos, because we are connected and there is spirit to everything that wants to communicate with us and we want and need to communicate with it. But technology has a place in that too, just by its very existence.
Yeah.
And when we think about, for example, shamanic, when we do distal healing, right? So when I do any work, a lot of times it's distal, it's long distance, but how do you do that? Well, of course it is, because the, spirit energy is here, but it's in a different plane. And if you think about it, you and I are talking right now and connecting right now, but I can't touch you, you know what I mean? And shake your hand. But here we are connecting, and that connection is real. So that's what I love technology for. It's almost like an ordinary reality version of
Yeah.
of crossing over to non-ordinary reality.
Yeah. And it's a conduit, right? And
Mm-hmm.
energy is energy. Energy lives in everything. Everything that has, is a living organism. Everything is interconnected. And these are just resources that allow us to be even that much more connected to one another. And I remember meeting with some of the elders and like, oh, no, we do everything in person. I'm like, I understand that. But when they started like doing the Zoom because of COVID and the
Right.
pandemic, they were like, oh, wow, like we
Yeah.
can do these, we can do healing ceremonies, we can do healing celebrations. The healing ceremonies aren't exactly the same. I love to still do those in person, but you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
do healing sessions virtually and you are connected. Energy is energy. You don't need to be in the same room as someone to feel their energy and feel that connection.
Right, absolutely. So let's shift a little bit to some of the topics that you work with. You talk about the power of self-awareness.
Mhm.
What does that mean for our listeners, to you?
Absolutely. The power of self-awareness is one of the most potent things throughout our journey. If we are not self-aware and that we are not able to take accountability for our journey and our choices, and everywhere where our path is, understanding that we are being guided, it's very challenging for us to be able to pivot and to be able to change our thinking patterns, our cycles, and so forth. So
Mhm.
it's really important that we have that awareness. What is my belief system? Like what do I actually believe about myself? What has been programmed? What has been instilled in me? And what is actually mine to own and how I
Mhm.
feel about myself? So it's
Mhm.
just understanding the conditioning and being open to be able to receive that information and to take guidance from others that are able to see it from an outside perspective, because we can't always see our blind spots when we're going through our journey. Sometimes we need somebody that is on the outside perspective is like, you know what? This is very destructive. This is a very destructive cycle. This is self-sabotaging and so forth. This isn't serving your highest good.
Right, right. That's beautiful. And that's where it starts, right? We need to know what our anchor is in order to expand our awareness to the spirit world around us and our connection. And I loved what you said about, really thinking about how do I connect to this? How do I find my own individual path? Because if everything is connected, what matters really is what resonates with you. What matters mostly is getting on that path, right? And making sure that you're listening to your highest self, right? Which is the one that's in resonance with the cosmos and the energy. So how might people begin to create a spiritual practice for themselves? What's a few beginner steps? Hi, it's Rachel here. If you'd like to dive deeper into your own self-development, but you're looking for an alternative to traditional talk therapy, I think you'll love the Foundation of Self Immersion program. For a full year, you'll get dynamic coursework you can complete on your own time, plus weekly coaching calls and monthly one-on-one sessions with me for personal support. Visit foundationofself.com and click on the events page for more information. That's foundationofself.com. Now, back to the episode.
Really, I think the most important part, obviously, with the self-awareness is also understanding and being aware of the energies that are around you, right? And feeling into that and allowing yourself to feel into that and not go into the intellectual body and start negating it or start avoiding it and going to a place of avoidance. So the most important part is about being able to be with self and to have that love for self. Mm-hmm. And when we're doing that, spiritual practice doesn't have to be like what everybody else says it is. Spiritual practice is unique to every individual on this planet. It will never look the same, as our journeys are never identical.
Right.
So I think it's really important to be able to go within and to be able to tune in with where we're being guided. Where is my instinctual, where is my intuitive senses guiding me? What do I need to receive today? What do I need to know today? What do I need to work on today? Mm-hmm. Right. And understanding that work doesn't mean that we're not perfect the way that we are today, but we're always can be able to strengthen ourselves so that we can have that sense of unconditional love and that sense of, that unwavering sense of inner peace and that knowingness that we are perfect the way that we are and the divinity that we are, but understanding that this life is meant to go through challenges and tribulations. Our guides don't care the journeys that we are navigating through. They just care that we are here experiencing life in the physical form. So I think it's just important to be able to go within. And sometimes that can look like drumming. Sometimes that can look like playing Tibetan bowls or crystal bowls. Sometimes that's just sitting in your own silence and just reflecting on how you are feeling, what feels out of alignment. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, is my mind racing? Am I thinking too much into the past? Am I thinking too much to the future? Am I being present in the moment? Mm-hmm. Right? Just having that ideology when you're going into your own self-work. It could be dancing, it could be singing, it could be anything that brings you to that center of peace.
Right. Yeah, I love that because so many people avoid a spiritual practice because they're afraid they're not going to do it right, or that they won't agree with some of the dogma around whatever group that they've aligned themselves with. And that's one of the reasons I love shamanism so much, is because there is such room for working with your compassionate helping spirits to be guided. And you are leaning in, but you're receiving, much as you did, you're receiving the guidance that you're meant to receive at that time, sometimes for 4 months at a time.
Yeah.
Till you get it right.
Like, listen to me now. Or I'm going to come back every night. There is no right or wrong, right? There is no right or wrong in our spiritual practice. In shamanism, no shaman is the same. Some are very good with our plant medicine. Some are better with energy. Some are better with universal wisdom. It all depends on who you are. And it doesn't mean you have to be a shaman to be able to be in spiritual practice. It doesn't mean you have to be a Reiki healer to be in spiritual practice. You just need to be able to go within and to trust within and where you're being guided. Maybe you're being guided to do something completely out of the element of any type of spiritual practice. Mm-hmm. Maybe you're being asked to open an old age home and really help. Like it can be anything. It can come to any variety, to any path, really.
Yeah, and I hope the people who are listening really take that to heart, because that's the power of the individual too, is because we are all connected to great mystery, great spirit, that we carry that within us, and to remember that, and to
Yeah.
remember the power that we actually have. So I
And
just wanted to go ahead.
yeah, and the only thing that I always say to my clients and to anyone that I'm able to speak to is that you never do smudging ceremonies unless you are a spiritual practitioner and you know what you're doing in the sense of bringing in energies and ridding of energy. So that is the only thing that I feel in spirituality that really shouldn't be. It's not a fad, right? It's a very sanctimonial thing. It's a very ceremonial thing. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can end up bringing entities within your being that really do not belong there. So I think it's just
Right.
that's the only thing that I would caution against, unless you have a spiritual practitioner and you have really been taught on how to actually cleanse your energy and do
Yeah,
that.
thank you for pointing that out, because that's really important. This is powerful stuff and it is sacred. And so we have to have that kind of reverence and understand what powers we're working with. Thank you for pointing that out, which is actually a good transition into the next question, which is um, the first part of it is kind of obvious to me. How important is nature? And I'm answering that already in my mind, but I know but how can we work with nature? If, can we do this without having been initiated? Can we do this? But like, how does just the person who is starting a spiritual practice work with nature?
Yeah. So sorry, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding. So are a spiritual practice as in like being a healer or just going into their own personal spiritual practice?
Somebody having, wanting to start their own personal spiritual practice, how can nature be used or
Absolutely.
worked with?
So, yeah, the elements are very important, and that is the vitality of who we are. We are all interconnected, and it's just like every movie that really has resonance to nature, that the elements are very important. They're very powerful. And we discredit and we discard them, but the animal kingdom is very important. And the way that we treat animals, the way that we respect our planet, and I'm not going to go into global warming or anything. I don't talk about anything of political, you know, agendas or anything of that nature, but it's just about the nature of who we are. We are meant to be in nature. We are meant to be interconnected with nature. We are meant to use the plant medicines to heal ourselves. We're not meant to use pharmaceutical products to heal ourselves. We are meant to use plant medicines. Sometimes with the advancements of our illnesses that we do need a little bit of that more
Sure.
modern, I'm not negating on that or, discrediting that. But the plant medicines, our planet is here to help us heal. Water itself is so healing. When you go swimming in water and you are just surrounded by water, it is so healing to every aspect of your physical being
Mhm.
because it is soothing, right? It relieves so much pain and so much chronic illness and so much inflammation. The trees, the wind, everything has its place in the way that we are connected and that we are healing. So it's really important to be able to connect to the elements. It's way harder to heal yourself in a concrete building than it is to go and take a walk in nature and
Mhm.
just have that restorative and just kind of have that re-energized sense of peace where you have that calmness and that stillness. I've never heard of anyone being able to heal and just to unplug in the wilderness of, a concrete jungle. They're going to the forest, they're going camping, they're going cottaging, they're going into nature so that they can reset themselves. And there's a very good reason for that, is that
Yeah.
those are the elements that we need in order to be able to reset ourselves.
Yeah, beautiful. So, and I think it also speaks to
Yeah.
what you were saying earlier, which is what speaks to you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, water is extremely healing. If you take a walk, I always recommend that you clear your mind and let yourself be called.
Yeah.
As you were called to that rock.
Yeah.
Some, for me, I'm often called to trees, and that's where I go, and then I have my conversation with the trees,
Yeah.
or whatever it is. And so And as you mentioned, everyone is going to be different, and there's no right or wrong way as long as you're coming with pure intention.
And sometimes it's, going barefoot in the forest and just grounding yourself to the frequencies and the vibration of the earth, or hugging that tree and feeling the vibration and the love that it's pulling you in, because it's all connected. It all wants love. Like everything is love. Everything is love and light and connected. Animals that we are meant to fear, we don't need to fear them. Like there are predators, obviously, but we don't need to fear bunnies. We don't need to fear deer. We don't need to fear chipmunks. We don't need to fear a lot of the things that we're told and conditioned to think to fear. The wilderness is not something to fear. That is just an illusion.
Right.
Nature is where we find our most center of inner peace. If you look at monks, they're not in concrete buildings. They're in nature on the mountains.
Right.
The reason for that.
Right. Beautiful. I appreciate that. And I think that's a really, really powerful reminder that we're not meant to be locked away in shelters, that, we need the rest of the world around us as much as it needs us.
That's right. And we need community, right?
Yeah.
We need community and not that segregation, and just having a friend or going into the forest with your family and just being in awe and looking at the trees or looking at the stars. How incredible does that feel to your soul when you do that? It feels absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Or just watching water, watching the waves, how soothing and calming is it?
Yeah.
And we wonder why all these relaxation videos are of nature.
Right.
I mean, it's pretty telling why they are, because those are the most powerful healing methods that we have in this planetary system.
Yeah. Beautiful. So Roxanne, how can people find you?
Absolutely. So they can connect with me on my website at www.roxannechaput.com, and all of my social media handles are under that name as well.
Okay, beautiful. And I'm going to have your links also in the show notes. And I just want to say thank you, Roxanne Chaput. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Rachel. It's been an honor. Thank you for having me, Miigwech.
Hi, this is Rachel Astarte from the Self-Talk Podcast. I'd love for you to send me your emails with questions or stories about yourself. What are you looking for? What are your questions? What are you grappling with in your own personal life that has to do with your identity, with yourself, with your very existence? These are the things that we're going to talk about during the podcast. And go ahead. It's all right. Get deep. I can handle it. So send them to Rachel@selftalkpodcast.com. And I'll see you on the next episode.